Tell you what, that man is the next Ty Bollinger. He's on a mission to save as many lives as he can. But now, without further ado, the man for whom cancer cells tremble every time he walks in the room. Give it up for Ty Bollinger, please.
Thank you. I got that green drink.
Yeah.
Let's see, I'll set it here if you don't mind. Thanks for coming this morning. That's really encouraging to hear Bill's story. I met Bill initially about a year ago. Dr. Harmon was speaking as well at that time. And it was in Evansville. He came up, and it was a small crowd in Evansville. And I got a chance to hang out a little bit that night. And then I learned from Steve just within the last couple of months how well that you're doing. So that's awesome. Really glad to hear your story. I'm gonna get a quick video with Bill later. Raise your hand if you've seen The Quest for the Cures. Okay, cool. A lot of you have seen that. I'm gonna get an interview with Bill later for what we're gonna do this fall. We're gonna launch the global Quest for the Cures. I'll be traveling internationally in May and June, but we'll be doing some interviews domestically as well. But I'd love to get your story. And I just talked to Dr. Harmon. I may end up getting him on as well, because that was kind of a missing piece to the puzzle when I produced The Quest for the Cures, and I look back on it, kind of doing the armchair quarterbacking. You know, hindsight's 20/20. You look back and say, well, you know, I didn't have enough about the spine and the relationship of the spine to overall health, and so that's a missing piece of the puzzle. And so I'm going to try to get Dr. Harmon to explain that for us, maybe for the Global Quest that we'll launch in October. Because I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that a lot of doctors don't even know about, and a lot of patients don't even know about. I was speaking in Dallas a few months ago, and who's heard of Dr. Charles Majors? He's a chiropractor up in Chicago. He was speaking about that as well. He was on The Quest for the Cures. I interviewed him last year. And his whole lecture, for 45 minutes, he talked about the relationship of the spine to different diseases, and the way that if this part of your spine is out, then you might have this symptom, and if this part of your spine is out of place, you might have this. Very interesting stuff. So anyway, stay tuned. There's more coming, but thanks for coming here this morning. I'm looking forward to the lecture. How long do I have? Till what, 11:30?
Yes.
11:30? Okay.
Unless you feel compelled to take a few more.
No, that's fine. That's about the right amount of time. This is the lecture that I typically give. I think I have like 80 slides or something. I spoke last month in San Diego, and I had like 40 minutes to go through 80 slides. Totally impossible. But we got more time today, so this will be better. The lecture I call Unplug from the Matrix. So who's seen the Matrix? All right. So we're not living in a literal matrix where they got the little thing in the back of their head, but I believe that, especially in the realm of health, that we are living in a matrix, because most of the things that we believe are gospel truth concerning our health are completely false. And the things that are true are thought of as quackery. And so what I want to try to do in this lecture today is to explain why things are the way that they are today, and then get into some ways that you can be healthy. But before we do that, we have to explain and answer the most frequently asked question that I get as I'm lecturing or as I'm dealing with people on the phone or whatever, is why does my doctor not know this? Right? And that's a good question, because doctors should know these. They should know these things, but they don't. So if you can control your cancer that's supposed to be terminal, like Bill did, through changing your diet and getting your spine aligned and drinking this green drink and detoxifying and rebounding and all these other things that many medical doctors look at and they laugh. They literally will laugh at you. If you can control cancer that way, why doesn't every medical doctor in the United States know about it? So we're going to answer that question for you first. These are just some, go back. What if I told you that there were multiple cures for cancer, but they're being systematically suppressed because cancer is worth $200 billion a year? Cancer industry is a big moneymaker. There are just as many people making money and making a living on cancer as there are people that are dying of cancer. And as Bill so aptly put it, a lot of them are actually dying from the treatments. They're not dying from the cancer itself. I'm friends with a forensic pathologist that used to work for the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. He's performed countless hundreds of autopsies on cancer patients over the last couple of decades. And according to him, he has never seen a cancer patient that actually died of cancer. They all died of the toxicities from the treatments, whether it's radiation or chemotherapy or a combination. He said he's not ever had a cancer patient that literally died of cancer. That's pretty shocking. So, Cancer Facts and Figures 2013, I should have edited it. Now this is the same PDF document for Cancer Facts and Figures 2015. It's on the American Cancer Society's website. And the little highlighted part says, here you can't read it, 1 in 2 men, 1 in 3 women alive today can face cancer. This part down here talks about the fact that upwards of 80% of all cancers are environmentally caused, and only about 5% of them have a genetic link. Who heard that on the mainstream news? What do we hear all the time? You got bad luck. You got the cancer gene. You know, you got the BRCA gene. You're going to have breast cancer, so you need to. Angelina Jolie, right? She's cut off both breasts, and now she had a preventative hysterectomy because she might get uterine cancer, right? Because she has these defective genes. Well, according to the American Cancer Society, not that they're this big bastion of truth, but even the mainstream says 5% are genetically linked. The rest is environmentally caused. And even if you do have bum genes, which I would debate that, but let's say that you have some bad genetics, which people are genetically predisposed to certain things. I'm not saying that. But let's say that you have genetic predisposition to cancer. There's a field of science now that's called epigenetics, which basically says, regardless of what your genetic predisposition is, there are a whole host of things that you can do to stop those genes from expressing the way that they would like to. Such as eating a good diet, such as exercising. And all these things that we'll talk about today, these are things that can affect the way that your genes express so that you don't have those bum genes expressed in cancer. Okay, so we'll get to that. Worldwide cancer rates expected to rise by 70% over the next 20 years. Now, there was a statistic, I can't remember who quoted this in the Quest for the Cures, that I think this was Dr. Ben Johnson, who has seen the documentary called The Secret. Okay, The Secret. So Dr. Ben was in The Secret. I think he was the only medical doctor that was in The Secret. He said that within the next decade, that they are predicting that 1 out of every 2 cases of cancer is going to be caused by the treatment for the cancer, whether it's radiation or chemotherapy. That 50% of cancers are going to be caused by the things that we're using to treat it. The protocols that we use today to treat cancer really don't make sense, and we'll get to that. So here's the game plan for the day. I'm going to share with you my story, why I do what I do. We're going to get into History 101, the history of big medicine, the medical cartel, for lack of a better word, here in the United States. We'll talk about the big 3, genocide. Who was here last year for the lecture? Okay, so we got about half dozen to a dozen. Good. So if you were here last year, you know what genocide is, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this Breast Cancer Awareness Month scam. Not that everybody that participates in scamming people, but we'll talk about the fact that at the upper levels it's a total scam. We'll go into natural cancer treatments, diet and exercise, detoxification, and then at the end we'll have time for questions, hopefully. And if not, you can ask me at lunch. And by the way, until I got here, this little green drink, this moringa, was all that I had. But I tell you, that avocado, that guacamole is good stuff. Yeah, I grew up in Texas, and that's one thing that we know is good guacamole. That's some good guacamole there. All right, so this is my family. This is why I do what I do. I want my kids to be healthy. I want them to have a future, and I want to see grandkids. And so the reason I do what I do is really for my family. And it's also because of the fact that I've lost all of my other family, my older family, to cancer. These are all the people that I've lost to cancer. Beginning in 1996, it was my dad, and then granddad, uncle, cousin, another granddad, grandma, and finally my mother here at the bottom right, died in 2004. And they all died from cancer. At least that's what the death certificate said, cancer. But honestly, my dad died of surgery. He didn't die of cancer. It was July 1996. Dad went in for an examination on his stomach. He'd been having stomach pains, and he was having extremely bad stomach pains that day. It was July the 1st, 1996. We took him into the hospital, and we knew it must be bad for Dad to go into the hospital. Louder?
Yeah, or we move the mic over.
I totally forgot I had a mic. I'm used to having a lob on, and I just didn't think of it. I need to hold this in. Okay, no problem. Okay, cool. Better? Better? I think I've shortened this thing. Hold on. Okay. Okay, test. There we go. All right, so Dad, we knew it must be bad for Dad to go to the hospital because he just wasn't the kind of guy that was a sissy. And not that you go to the hospital, you're a sissy, but Dad was just, he was just, it hurts, it's going to get better. He did not like going to the doctor's or hospital. So we took him in and they said it was gallstones. And they said that they needed to go in and take them out. So we said, yeah, go cut them out, gallstones, got to do it. And so 6 hours later, the doctor comes out, and he's in tears, and he says that it's cancer, it's so advanced, it's all over your stomach. And so we said, so what should we do? He said, well, we should cut his stomach out, right? So they cut his stomach out, about 90% of his stomach, if I remember right, maybe 85%, 90% of his stomach. Which really, I mean, when you look back, I look back and I say, really? You have tumors in your stomach, so you cut the whole stomach out? I mean, look, I got pain in my arm, let's cut it off, right? We don't do that with other body parts, you know, I got a pain in my ear, let's get the knife out, cut it off. But we do that with cancer, and the reason is because we're really ignorant of how to treat cancer, what cancer is, and what we can do to reverse those tumors, which tumors are not the cancer. The tumors are a symptom of something that's gone wrong in the body. Anyway, Dad got his stomach cut out, and 25 days later he died. And he died from the surgery. He had 19 blood transfusions in 25 days, and they didn't patch him up right, and he bled to death. But he was the first of many of my relatives that died as a result of cancer, maybe not directly from the cancer, but because of the cancer or the treatments to the cancer. So that's why I do what I do, because we suffer. You know, when you're 27 years old and you lose your father, and I was just over 30, I lost my mother, and by the time I was 35, I was the oldest one in my family left. Something's wrong. And so I didn't want other families to have to suffer the way that we had suffered. And I began to do research and began to learn that, man, there's a lot of things out there that we can be doing on this cancer epidemic that nobody knows about, or very few people know about, that I wish that people did know about. And so I just began to compile it all, put it into a book, and I published my first book in 2006, Cancer Step Outside the Box, which has become a best-selling book, and it's not because I'm a great author or because I was a great marketing guy, because I'm not either. But it just hit a sweet spot with people because people were looking for that information. They wanted to know what they can do because so many people have cancer. And so as a result, it's really helped a lot of people, and I'm thankful for that. But it's not because I'm something special or because I had this great marketing team behind me. It was me and my wife. And we self-published the book because nobody would publish it because it was too controversial. And you know, thank God people began to buy it because they were looking for this information and it resonated with them. Because the truth resonates. People read the book or they read other books that I've read and say, you know, that just makes sense. And well, whether you have an MD after your name or not, you still have the brain. And we're still able to think, and we still have logic, and the truth resonates with people. The problem with the treatments for cancer today is, the one primary problem is that they cause cancer. Right? Their chemotherapy is carcinogenic. It causes cancer. It causes later cancers. Not that it doesn't kill cancer up front. Chemotherapy targets fast-dividing cells, and it'll shrink a tumor. But as I said before, the tumor's not the problem. The tumor's a symptom of something that's gone wrong in your body. You don't have cancer because you have a deficiency in chemotherapy. Okay? So taking chemotherapy cannot cure your cancer by definition because there's something else that's gone wrong. Now it can shrink that tumor, but see, that's the danger that we get into with conventional treatments for cancer is we equate shrinking a tumor with success. And that's not necessarily the case because the tumor can shrink and the chemotherapy can shrink the tumor. Meanwhile, it's destroying your immune system. And that's why they say we think we got it all, we think the tumor's gone, and then it comes back a year or two later because that treatment destroyed your own body's ability to fight cancer. And so later on, it inevitably comes back after chemotherapy because you just destroyed your own ability to fight it, to fight the cancer by destroying the immune system. Radiation, every oncologist knows that radiation causes cancer. And surgery can seed the cancer. It can cause the spread into the metastasis of cancer, metastasis, because it will seed the cancer into the bloodstream. That's the problem with the big three treatments. They cause the disease they're supposed to be treating. I think we're going to just have to talk about that the rest of the time. Okay, there we go. So, you know, they cause all these symptoms. To me, it seems like it would be a lot better of a choice to do a treatment that doesn't cause all the symptoms, right? So you have nausea, hair loss, vomiting, you can't eat. A lot of times you go into what's called a cachexia cycle, which your body basically digests itself. You've seen cancer patients that are late-stage cancer patients that look like they came from a concentration camp, right? That's their body going into cachexia. And a lot of times, that's a result of the drugs, right? The chemotherapy can cause that. To me, it makes more sense to do a treatment that's not as toxic. And that's, you know, Bill was talking about that. That made sense. You didn't want to go through those things. Where am I supposed to be pointing this thing to get it to change?
Just make sure you're getting the bottom part of it. I can
The bottom? Okay. Let's see. Maybe, okay, change there. Okay, so how effective is chemotherapy? Because if you talk to an oncologist, they'll say, look, you know, chemo is your best chance. It's 50 to 60 to 70% effective. You always hear those terms, you know, it's kind of this vague, you know, you got better than half, you know, 50% chance of making it with chemo. Or if you can't, if it's not going to cure you, it'll at least shrink the tumor for a while, right? That's what they told you, Bill. Because we can shrink the tumor. But you're still going to die. We'll shrink that tumor. Yeah, they say they buy you a month, but you're going to still die, but we'll shrink the tumor. Okay. Okay, that's supposed to make me excited? We shrink the tumor. I don't know if I have a quote in here, but it's a quote by Dr. Philip Benzel, and he was a medical doctor 60, 70 years ago. He said to him, it was so ironic that he believed that we were treating the wrong thing by focusing on shrinking tumors. Because he'd say, you know, we have all this focus on shrinking tumors, but nobody's focusing on how's the patient actually doing, how's the quality of life. And he says, you know, at autopsy, we would have the oncologists that were there at the autopsy, and they'd say, hey, look, great, the tumor's completely gone. And they would be excited about the fact that the tumor's gone at the autopsy, but the patient was dead. So we're focusing on the wrong thing. Shrinking tumors do not equate to a healthy patient. Because as I just mentioned, you can shrink a tumor with chemotherapy, but you just destroyed the person's immune system, and the cancer is going to come back. And I hear this, I mean, I literally, some days I'll get over 1,000 emails. And I get contacted from cancer patients all over the world, and the one common theme that I get from patients or their relatives is that, you know, my mom, dad, brother, sister went in for chemo, and they shrunk the tumor, and they said they were clear, or they were in remission. And now it's a year or two later, and the cancer's back, but it's no longer just breast cancer, but it's metastasized to the lymph, to the bones, to the heart, to the brain, wherever it might be. And they're terminal now, and there's nothing they can do. Well, the reason that that is the case is because you just destroyed your body with the treatment. How effective is chemo? This is a study that was done by the Northern Sydney Cancer Center in Sydney, Australia. They looked at 22 types of cancer. They looked at over 20,000 patients, and they determined what kind of a contribution does chemotherapy make to 5-year survival? Because that's the way that we typically look at cancer success, is do you live 5 years? And they found out you can't really, it's 2.1% is the effectiveness or the contribution that chemotherapy makes to a 5-year survival rate. In other words, for those people that live 5 years, only 2.1% of them live 5 years because of chemo. The other people that live 5 years lived without chemo. So then you look and you say, if you look at the risk benefit of chemo, you have 2.1% of people that take chemo will live 5 years because of the chemo. And look at the side effects that are caused by the treatment. And then you've got to get in and say, is this worth it to me? You know, I want to be vomiting and lose my hair and just the depression that chemo causes, the loss of mental acuity. I mean, chemo brain, you've heard of chemo brain, right? I mean, every oncologist knows what chemo brain is. It destroys your mind too. It destroys the synapses in your brain. So do you really want that? Okay, so So 2.1% effective 5-year survival.
Changing back here, but it's not changing on that.
Okay.
Well, you need to go back to that. I can just do it manually.
Okay, can you just manually change it? Okay, just go to the next slide, please. Okay. That's right. We have more than 45 minutes, so it's no rush.
What slide would you like?
Just go back to where, I don't even know where we were. Yeah, go to the 2.1% slide if you could. Okay, and then just go to the next slide, next slide. I've given a lecture many times, but we don't need it. That's okay. Get a drink of my green drink. This, by the way, is Moringa oleifera. Bill was talking about that. It's Moringa is actually a tree, and it is the most nutrient-dense botanical that is on the face of the earth. I drink probably 3 or 4 of these a day, and some days until I eat dinner, that's all I have. But you get all the nutrition that you need to sustain life through just one little drink. So it's excellent. Okay, was this the one after the 2.1%?
There was one.
That's the quote from a radiation therapist. Just leave it there, unless you've already pushed the button and it's going to change in 10 seconds. Let me see if I can read this, because it's a little dark, and I know you can't read it back there. Let me read this quote to you. This is a quote. I got an email from a radiation therapist. This was probably 2 years ago now. He says, "Hi Ty, I purchased your book. I'm really starting to learn. I'm really starting to get into it now. I've been watching you on YouTube. I can't even read it. It's all washed out. Anyway, the gist of this is this guy had owned 2 different oncology clinics over the past couple decades. It was radiation therapy that they did at these clinics. He said they would get people that came in that looked like they were about to die, literally, and they were about to die. They were cachexic, they were wasting away. He said, I always wondered, why do we rush these people that are really in bad shape? Why do we rush them into treatments, radiation treatments? Because it looks to me that it would do more harm than it would good, that it might kill them. They're already in bad shape. And he said one of those times he asked one of the oncologists, the radiation oncologist, why do we rush these patients into treatment? And the oncologist said, I know this is going to sound morbid, but unless we get at least 3 treatments in before they die, we don't get paid. And so he said he realized at that point that he was in the wrong business. And so he got out of the business. But he said he realized at that point that this is an industry, and a lot of the decisions that are being made for these cancer patients are not based upon what's good for the patient. They're based upon what different hoops do we have to jump through in order to get paid before the patient dies. And that's just not the way things should be. And so to his credit, he got out of the business. I know a lot of doctors that are still in the business that realize that it's a corrupt business and that it's a money-making industry, but they're still doing what they're doing. Because hey, they're people too. They got mortgages, they got kids, they want to go send them to college, and they've got all these financial obligations, and they don't know what they would do if they got out of the industry. And I'm not excusing it, because if that were me, and I can say this with 100% assurance, I'd be out tomorrow. If I got to go stand on the corner and wash cars to support the family, I could not do something that I knew was going to be killing people. So I'm not trying to make an excuse for the oncologists, but they're people too, and so they've got to come to a grips with. I went to school for a decade to learn a bunch of misinformation, and now I'm knee-deep in debt, and I got to figure out what I need to do about it. And so a lot of them are making the right decision and getting out of the industry, and a lot of them still haven't. And I'm not indicting every oncologist either. There's some good oncologists. Okay, and I'm speaking in general terms here. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Come on now. Hold your breath. Okay, next slide. $90 billion per year on cancer. Wow. That's a B. That's a lot of money. Now, if we had been in San Diego, they would have said, okay, your lecture's over. Yeah, okay, next slide. Okay, so this is interesting. This is an interesting statistic. This was a survey that was done at McGill Cancer Center in Montreal. They surveyed 78 oncologists. And this is late 90s, so almost 20 years ago. They asked them at that point, they were talking specifically, the survey was about a chemotherapy drug called cisplatin, and they asked the oncologist, would you or your loved ones, would you prescribe cisplatin to you or your loved ones if you were sick with cancer, right? Of the 76, I think it was 64, which would be, I think 85% said no. No, but they were prescribing it to their patients at that time, but 85% of them said they would not prescribe it to themselves or their family. Why? Because it's too toxic, right? They also asked them another question on the same survey, would you take any chemotherapy agent, not just specifically cisplatin, but any chemo agent? And of those same 78, 56, I think it was, so just over 70% said no. So between 70 to 85% of the oncologists there wouldn't do any chemotherapy, or the 85% wouldn't do cisplatin. So the reason I tell you the story is that it seems a bit disingenuous to me for a professional that prescribes chemotherapy to his or her patients to not be willing to do it themselves if they got sick. Something's wrong there. And if they won't do it because they know it's too toxic, and they won't do it because they know that it can cause other cancers in the future, which they all know this. I mean, heck, who's heard of Gardasil? The vaccine for cervical cancer, right? You know that it's been shown to cause other cancers, and on the insert it says that it can cause other cancers? On the Gardasil vaccine? So, all right, so we have, and it's to treat the HPV, right? The human papillomavirus, which supposedly causes cervical cancer. And I'm not going to get into that debate here, but I would question that. 96% of HPV goes away on its own without any treatment. Did you know that? 96%. So your daughter is getting the Gardasil or the cervix vaccine for cervical cancer to prevent. And let's say that they even have the HPV virus, which you don't even have to have that to get the vaccine, but let's say they have it. 96% of that will go away on its own without any treatment. But if you use the vaccine, on the insert it says it might cause, and it lists other cancers that it could cause. This is insanity. They were treating a disease that we're trying to prevent with things that will cause it. And not only will it cause it, it's out in the open, hidden in plain sight, that it might cause these new diseases. Okay, next slide. Okay, so forced chemotherapy. This is something that's really hitting home today, because we have a lot of cases now of juveniles under the majority age that are being forced chemotherapy, right? This doesn't seem like something that would happen in the good old USA, but it's happening right now. This is an article that was on CNN just a few weeks ago about a girl named Cassandra up in Connecticut. She's 17. She was diagnosed with cancer, and I can't remember the kind of cancer. She did not want to do chemotherapy, and they took her from her family. They confiscated her. They kidnapped her. CPS kidnapped her from her family, and she is still in the hospital being forced chemotherapy against her wishes. Okay? The reason that I talk about this is that one of the things that I fight for is just our freedom to do as we feel led to do for our own health. Right? If we're in a country that we can't even make the decision that we feel is best for ourselves or our family, then something's wrong, and we need to rise up against it. And we have to speak out about these types of things. I was speaking in San Diego, as I mentioned, at the end of last month, and I talked about this Cassandra. The next morning I was walking through the breakfast area at the hotel, and this mother came up and grabbed me, and she said, my son's 7, they're forcing him to do chemotherapy. And I said, really? So I interviewed her, and really sweet lady, got 8 kids, I think, and the youngest, I think he's 7. And they're forcing him to do chemotherapy. He was diagnosed with some kind of leukemia, and they, again, you know, the typical protocol. You do what we say to treat your child, even though you're the parent. We will treat them with chemotherapy, even though the statistics are not with us. But we're going to treat them with chemo, and if you refuse,